Hi everyone. Good morning. This is Latika Pai with Microsoft. Hope you all are doing well today. With us, on our webinar series as part of the Highway to 100 Unicorns, we have Veda Vedantham, who leads the startup business for Razorpay. Prior to this, Veda has been an advisor to several startups on their digital marketing strategy. When Veda and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, I requested him to join us here on our webinar series because I think what many startups believe is that they have to spend tons of money to get an online presence and for digital marketing. I think Veda's with us to really help you all to understand there are ways to do it without having to spend the money, and when the time is right to actually invest in digital marketing. What we're going to do is Veda has a deck for us. He's going to run through the deck. I will be moderating the questions and look at the questions, and we'll probably keep it to the end unless I believe there's something that all of you desperately need to know and have found confusing. So Veda, thank you so much for being here with us today. Really appreciate it. Over to you.
Thank you so much for those kind words, Latika. Very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me over. And a big hello to all of our audiences who've joined from both India and the Asia Pacific region, I believe. So good morning to all of the people who've joined from India. Good afternoon for all of the people who've joined from the APAC region. I hope all of you are doing safe and sound. Your loved ones are safe and sound. Your employees, your colleagues, everybody is safe and sound. I know we live in pretty unprecedented times. Very excited to be here. As Latika mentioned, I take care of the SME and the startup practice at Razorpay, both marketing and sales. And Razorpay happens to be one of India's top B2B payment companies. And previously led marketing for multiple digital brands. I also serve as a marketing visiting faculty member in digital marketing at quite a few top Indian B schools, various IIMs, and serve as a marketing mentor, work with various startup acceleration programs, SME chapters with the Government of India and independent ones. And thank you so much for deciding to spend an hour and a half of your life in this session. Let me just take a moment to share my screen. Just bear with me for a second. Is everybody able to see my screen? Are you able to see the screen, Latika, Kabir?
Yeah, Veda, this is good.
Awesome. So over the next hour and a half or so, this is what I had in mind for us to discuss. So we look at a couple of very interesting digital inflection points which happened during the year 2020 in the developing digital economies of the world. I'm not going to bore you with the usual stats that all of us are aware of. In terms of how the developed markets, the digital penetration has increased, how all of these are amongst the fastest growing in the world. India, Indonesia, a lot of markets like these are amongst the fastest growing in the world and happen to be amongst the largest. I'm going to talk to you about a couple of very interesting inflection points which kind of slip below the radar. A lot of people did not notice this. I'm going to talk to you about some of those inflection points. We'll then talk about the impact of the pandemic itself on the startup and the SME ecosystem. This is particularly more applicable for India based on Razorpay's vantage point of having a ringside perspective of what's happening across the startup ecosystem. We'll spend a couple of minutes on this just for me to give you a sneak peek into the kind of positive impact, if any, if at all, that the pandemic has had on the startup ecosystem. We'll then take a fork in the road and we look at two specific parts from a digital marketing and from a marketing perspective. At the most philosophical level possible, as a digital marketer, as a marketer, as an entrepreneur who's looking to build a digital brand presence and who's looking to expand your customer base, there are two large problem statements you're looking to solve for. One essentially is on customer acquisition, new customer acquisition. And the second is on engagement and nurturing of the people who already have some kind of affinity towards your brand, who are already part of your funnel. So we look at both of these pieces. We'll double click on both of these. To begin with, we look at some simple rules of thumb or some frameworks for deciding for your business. How do you prioritize your efforts from a digital marketing perspective? And this is a consistent point of feedback that I have often heard in all of my interactions with startup founders, business owners, and digital marketers. While they understand what are all of the digital marketing playbooks available at their disposal, what they struggle with is knowing how to prioritize their efforts given that their resources are limited. A lot of them are bootstrapped. They're not heavily, they don't have a lot of VC funds. So they want to understand how do you actually prioritize your digital marketing efforts. So I'll give you some simple rules of thumb which can help you make these decisions. I used to lead marketing for a health tech company called Healthify Me, which happens to be amongst India's top health and fitness mobile applications. It also has a presence in the Asia Pacific region. I'll talk to you about what were some of the things that worked in Healthify Me's case from an acquisition perspective. Then we'll shift tracks, we'll focus on customer engagement. And I'll talk to you about some of the best practices again from a customer engagement perspective. I'll delve into some best practices that we employed at Simply Learn, which was my previous experience prior to Healthify Me, which is one of the world's top edtech companies. I'll talk to you about what were some of the things that we did, what worked, what did not work from an engagement and nurture perspective. And towards the end, we'll have a couple of bonus features, so to speak, both of which are pretty close to my heart. First of all, we'll focus on the need for repeat business. How do you drive greater repeat volumes? And I'll talk to you about a couple of things there. One, a failure caselet. I did believe it then, and I believe it even more so now, that we learn a lot more from our failures than we do from our successes. So I'll talk to you about a failure caselet of how we could not turn around and why the repeat success story, the repeat story in a business that I was a part of many years ago. Then I'll also talk to you about a successful caselet of how we actually managed to turn around the repeat story. And then towards the end, we'll talk about various ways in which you as a business owner, as a marketer, can create brand exposure for your business. And we'll talk about some of the underutilized aspects of brand exposure creation. Yeah. That's what I had for you. We'll wrap up the presentation in an hour or so, and then we leave the last 30 minutes for Q&A. Please keep your questions flowing in, put it up on the chat window, direct it to Latika, and then we'll take up all of the questions towards the end. But if there are specific questions, Latika, feel free to interrupt me. If there are questions which are relevant, very relevant, extremely relevant to the slide which is being discussed, please feel free to interrupt me at any point, and we can have that question right then and there. Yeah?
Done. I'll do that. Thanks, Veda. This is great. This is really, I think, what I like the way you've structured the deck. So appreciate it.
Sure. So the couple of very interesting inflection points which have kind of swept across the digital ecosystem in the last year or so. The first inflection point is this. This is extremely relevant in the context of a lot of developing markets. And the term search and the term Google search is almost synonymous. Google search via the browser web, it's almost synonymous because it has a complete monopoly of the market. But for the first time ever in the year 2020, and that's also true in the year 2021 now, so far the first 6 months of the year, the search via the Google Play Store became the #1 numero uno logical entry point for people to discover www, the World Wide Web, which was again a very interesting data point. Which essentially has a lot of implications for business owners, for digital entrepreneurs, and for digital marketers. For digital entrepreneurs, it means that your mobile app needs to be front, middle, and center of your digital brand building strategy. And for digital marketers, it means that your mobile marketing needs to be the fulcrum of your digital marketing strategy. The other very interesting inflection point which happened during the year 2020, this is particularly more so applicable for India and to a certain extent Indonesia, is that despite the huge growth of digital over the last several years, over the last decade, the huge growth of social media, it was still this extremely popular symbol which you see over here, the television, which was the #1 awareness building vehicle, the brand awareness building vehicle. What you see here are the various phases that a brand goes through, the various phases of a brand life cycle, that happens in the psyche of a prospect, wherein a brand moves from awareness to consideration, wherein a person actually develops a certain level of affinity towards a particular brand, towards a long list of brands, and then begins to closely evaluate a short list of brands before they take the eventual action of purchase. So despite the growth of digital, this television set was the #1 awareness building vehicle in a lot of developing markets. And it's only in the last year that all of these extremely popular digital symbols, which need no introduction, became the #1 numero uno logical awareness building vehicles, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Again, which attests to the explosive growth of digital that we've seen in the last year or so. Moving on, let's spend a couple of minutes to just understand the impact that the pandemic has actually had on the startup ecosystem. This is particularly more so relevant for India, and we live in the times of the pandemic, so we certainly need to acknowledge the T-Rex in the room. At Razorpay, we often think of ourselves as an index fund that sits on top of the entire startup ecosystem in the country, because we process the entire cycle of money movement for a lot of these brands. And we've seen a huge growth of EdTech. E-commerce, of course, has always been big, but we've seen a huge boom of EdTech and health tech, which completely coincidentally also happened to be the case studies that we would be looking at today. And I'm sure there would be a good representation of both EdTech and health tech companies in today's audience as well. So there's a lot of growth of IT SaaS companies and gaming, which is again intuitive, right? People are stuck at home. They want ways and means to upskill themselves, which explains the growth of EdTech. They want ways and means to discover healthier and fitter versions of themselves, which explains the growth of health tech. We're seeing a lot of first-time digital entrepreneurs coming in the last year or so. These are not people moving over from one competitive player to the other. And for a lot of them, it's about digital brand presence building, which is their larger problem statements. And they are also processing more monies through the Razorpay ecosystem, which again attests to the strong product market fitment that a lot of these players have. And at Razorpay, we've observed a lot of these headwinds across both the inward money movement cycle and the outward money movement cycle. And one last point here, which I find it particularly interesting, is that a lot of these digital entrepreneurs, while they appreciate the importance and the relevance of digital and tech for growing their business, they don't necessarily understand the nuts and bolts and the nitty-gritties of digital and tech, nor do they want to. They want that level of complexity abstracted away from them, which is why at Razorpay, we've seen a huge growth of what we internally call #no-code products, like a payment page, payment link, payment buttons, etc. So some very encouraging signs as we look ahead for the future of the digital ecosystem, as we look ahead to the next 12, 24, and 36 months. Now, as I said, the pandemic has brought digital to the forefront like never before. And a lot of entrepreneurs, as I said, need help with navigating this digital jigsaw. They need help with prioritization more than anything else. That is the specific area where they need a lot of help. They understand from an acquisition perspective, from a new acquisition perspective, what all of these popular terms are: Facebook, SEM, SEO, LinkedIn. But what they need help with is knowing for their business what needs to be their #1 priority, given that their time is limited, financial resources are limited, people resources are limited. How do they prioritize? And I'm sure most of you here in the audience today would be aware of what all of these terms mean, but let me spend 30 seconds in giving you a quick crash course on some of these terms. Let's say Latika is looking to plan a holiday. She wants to visit the Maldives, and she's searching for resorts in Maldives. Let's say there is no right now.
You read my mind, Veda. This is a super case study. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sure. And let's say there is no pandemic at play today. We're living in a beautiful world without the pandemic, and Latika is looking to plan a holiday to the Maldives, and she searches for resorts in Maldives. Now, every time a search happens on Google, a virtual real-time auction happens. Very similar to an auction in a real world. Let's say I'm looking to auction this OnePlus phone, where you have multiple people bidding various prices for that phone. In this case, you have multiple advertisers queuing up to bid for the right for first placement of their advertisement for that particular keyword, which is being for that particular search for on that particular keyword, which is being made by a customer. So in this case, let's say Make My Trip has bid say $20 for that particular keyword. Booking.com has bid say $50 for that keyword. Now, there are multiple factors that go into deciding whose ad comes up on top, but for the most part, it is decided by who bids the highest. In this particular case, given that Booking.com has bid the highest, Booking.com's ad comes up on top. So when Latika sees her search results, she would see the tag ad listed against Booking.com, which appears first, and Make My Trip, which appears the second. So let's say Latika clicks on the Booking.com advertisement. Booking.com is charged $50 by Google, which is cost per click advertising. So, and Google provides a platform called Google AdWords, which is a free platform, using which advertisers like Booking.com, Make My Trip, various startups can set up these kinds of search engine marketing, SEM advertisements. Now, say if Latika scrolls further down in that search results page, she would see a bunch of different organic listings which do not have the tag ad listed against them. If Latika were to click on any of these ads, any of these links, the brand would not be charged any money. Yeah, these are, and all of the efforts, and this is based purely on merit. It has nothing to do with who bids the highest. It's got nothing to do with who has the most money. This is purely based on Google's organic search rankings algorithms decision on which landing page, which website has the most relevant content, has the freshest content, has the best user experience, is optimized for, say, mobile, if the search is happening for mobile, has the smallest bounce rate, so to speak, has the maximum number of backlinks or link backs from other authoritative domain sources. So this is Google's determination of which is the most relevant, meritorious, not the guy who has the most money, not the guy who bids the highest, relevant, meritorious link which is appropriate to that particular user search query. And a lot of people, in fact, you see better click-through rates on your organic listings than the advertisements, because customers trust organic rankings more than paid advertisements. So if, say, Latika were to click on any of those links which do not have the ad tag listed against them, which are called organic links, the brand would not be charged any money. And all of the efforts that you as a marketer, as a business owner undertake to make sure that your website, your landing page has the best chance of bubbling up higher and higher in the rankings in Google's organic search ranking algorithm are referred to as SEO, search engine optimization. Facebook and LinkedIn, of course, need no introduction. Just on the topic of SEO, I mean, there are a lot of things, a lot of great things that you can do as a startup just using SEO alone. I want to spend a couple of minutes to just talk about the power of SEO. Many years ago, I was in a travel tech startup and fairly well funded. I used to, take care of marketing there. And as most of you would remember, travel is possibly the most competitive space after e-commerce when it comes to the digital world. And in India especially, you had a lot of multinational companies, Booking.com, the Ibibo Group, etc., which were extremely focused in the Indian market. Plus, you also had a lot of homegrown players who were, very well funded with deep pockets. Make My Trip, Clear Trip, Oyo, Stayzilla, etc. And despite that, there was this small bootstrap company called Thrillophilia, which used to beat everybody else when it came to SEO, because they had no money, right? They were completely bootstrapped. They had not raised $1 in VC funding. And they used to beat every single multinational player and homegrown, well-funded, VC-funded player when it came to SEO, because they were focused on SEO. They had done a really good job of on-page optimization. They had got a lot of backlinks from different sources, and they used to beat everybody else. So I just wanted to make that point to underscore the power that SEO brings to the table, and how even if you're a bootstrap company, can hold your own against a lot of well-funded players. It's almost like David versus Goliath. David has a chance to succeed against Goliath if you were to focus on SEO. That's another example of a company called Practo, which is India's leading marketplace for doctors and for physicians. So if you look, if say somebody is sick, I hope nobody is sick, but let's say somebody is sick and they want to discover a doctor near their place who has a lot of ratings and reviews, etc., they can do that using Practo. Practo has, I think, around 25-30 million visits a month. Their website gets 25-30 million hits a month. 90% of those are not paid for, they're free. They come through SEO. And they've done a really good job of SEO. They've got a fantastic team which does a great job in SEO. 90% of that 25-30 million is free. They don't pay it. They don't pay a single dollar for all of that traffic, which is like amazing. So let's say Latika is a doctor. She's a gynecologist in Bangalore who has a thriving practice, and she has her own website, let's say, and she's also listed on Practo with a page. If I search for Dr. Latika in Bangalore, her listing on Practo would come up higher than her own website. They've done such a great job when it comes to SEO. So I just wanted to mention those points, and I'm sure Facebook and LinkedIn advertising, most of you are aware of. Now, let's say Latika is an entrepreneur. She understands all of this, but she's not sure how should she prioritize for her business. What needs to be her P0, priority number 1 focus? So the first question, so in Latika's attempt to answer this, if Latika were to ask this question, the first thing she has to do is to ask the question, the product or the category in which I'm operating in which my business is operating in, is that mass or is that niche? Now, there are a couple of different ways in which you can answer this question. One is, as an entrepreneur, you have a gut-based instinct on the space that you operate in. I sell t-shirts online, I'm probably mass. I sell mental wellness programs online, I'm probably niche. Right? So that is that subjective approach. So that is one way in which Latika can answer the question. Now she needs to triangulate that response and validate that hypothesis by using a more objective measure, which is where data comes in. So all she has to do now is open up the Google AdWords platform that I mentioned earlier, within which there is a tool called as a keyword planner. And the keyword planner essentially gives you a sense of what is the keyword search volume, how many people, how many searches are actually happening in the target geography that you are involved in for relevant keywords related to your category every single month. Now, what Latika would do is she would open up keyword planner, put in her target geography, let's say that's India, and search for, let's say she's running a company which is into mental wellness, and she searches for mental wellness classes online, or all of the relevant core keywords which are most appropriate for the category in which she's operating in. And she looks at the kind of search volume patterns, monthly search volume patterns. Now, this is not a perfect science. It is part art, part science. It's not a binary. It is a grayscale. It is a spectrum. But one rule of thumb that you can operate with as an entrepreneur, as a digital marketer, is that for a country, if your target market is, say, India, for a country, for a target market as large as India, with the kind of internet population base that India has, if your monthly keyword search volumes are lesser than 20,000 searches a month, you can consider the space that you operate in to be niche. If it is more than 20,000, 15, 20,000 a month, you can consider it to be mass. Now, if you're mass, now Latika has answered this question. She knows that she does mental wellness online, potentially. She sells these classes online. She sells these courses online. She knows that the space that she's operating in is niche. Let's say she's not doing mental wellness, she's selling t-shirts online, or she's running an online travel company. So she's operating in a mass space. If you are mass, then you make Google your number one priority, both a combination of SEM and SEO. Why? Because it makes the most logical sense, because there are enough and more people who are already searching for keywords related to your category. There is already existing user demand patterns out there. It's not even latent. It is already apparent. So it makes sense for you to piggyback and ride that wave. Not all of us can be an Amazon or a Flipkart. We may not be able to change or create new user behavior patterns, but what we can very well do is we can get to piggyback on existing user demand patterns. And which is what you should do here, because you are operating in a massy space. You already have a lot of people searching for keywords which are relevant to your category. So ride that wave, make Google your number one priority. Now, what happens if you're not that lucky? What happens if you're niche? A lot of startups which start off, right, they do operate in niche spaces. You don't directly run into Facebook's arms. What you do is you ask yourself an additional question. The space that you're operating in, is it high on its ability to strike a very strong personal connect with your end customers? And do you have the opportunity to inject a very strong visual element in your communication? Let me give you an example. When I first joined Healthify.me, and Healthify.me, as I said, happens to be India's top health and fitness mobile application. It is a freemium mobile app. There are certain aspects that are free, certain that are paid for, which is why it's freemium. And it has, the free service involves a calorie counter. It has the world's largest database of Indian foods that are mapped to accurate calorie breakdowns. So let's say Latika has had a plate of aloo paratha, which is a very popular Indian dish for breakfast today. She can actually figure out how many calories she's consumed. She can figure out how many vitamins, carbs, protein she's consumed. And it could be any exotic dish from any remote part of the country. It could be from Assam, Kashmir, Kanyakumari, Andaman, Nicobar, Gujarat, any part of the country. Latika would be able to figure out, how many calories she's consumed, and if she's consumed a healthy meal or not. It makes her a lot more mindful of her eating habits. Plus, of course, let's say she's done a set of Surya Namaskars today morning, or she's gone for a 5-kilometer jog. She can figure out how many calories she's burnt. Now that's available for free, which is the calorie counter. It's like a daily diary, and for water consumption as well. It provides you a count, and you can actually log all of these things on the app, which is free. The premium service involves creating a personalized diet, fitness, yoga plan for that customer through Healthify.me's team of nutritionists, fitness coaches, yoga coaches, and it also has an AI-powered virtual nutritionist called Ria, right? Very similar to Siri and a lot of these other AI-powered bots. Now, in the Healthify.me's case, when I had first joined Healthify.me, it was a huge culture shock for me, because for the first time in my life, I was seeing Facebook as the number one driver for customer acquisitions from a digital perspective. There was directly attributable ROI, directly attributable line of sight to ROI from Facebook as a channel. In all of my previous experiences, it was Google search, which was the number one breadwinner, so to speak, for all of the other brands. Facebook was more of a quote-unquote brand channel with limited and flaky line of sight to ROI. But here in Healthify.me, it was Facebook, which was the number one. Google was a second. And it was a huge culture shock for me. It was a big eye opener. And it was because the space that we were operating in, it was in the space of health and fitness and weight loss. We were enabling people to lose weight, discover healthier and fitter versions of themselves. We were enabling a 40-something working professional who's got a beer belly or who's got hypertension, diabetes due to a sedentary lifestyle, overcome that. We were enabling a 20-something young man to get a six-pack ab and muzzle up. We were enabling a 35-something young mom, for example, who's put on a lot of post-pregnancy body fat and lost confidence. We enable her to actually lose weight. We enable a 20-something young woman to gain strength and flexibility. Right, so we were enabling people to lose weight, discover healthier and fitter versions of themselves, which has a huge opportunity, which is as personal as it gets. It's very close to the personal identity and the makeup of an individual. Plus, as a brand, we didn't do any talking ourselves. All of our communication was testimonial led. We let our customers come in and narrate authentic retellings of the kind of life transformations that they have seen after using the Healthify app. So again, very strong visual element can be injected in communication. It was all video, which does well on Facebook. So for all of these reasons, Facebook was a big hit for us. And this is particularly true.
Sorry to interrupt here. I think, the past couple of examples you've given are B2C. Most of our folks who are logging in are B2B. So I just want you to keep that in mind in terms of, suggestions that you make. So in this particular case, would you consider B2B as niche, and as a result, this would be the solution for them?
So if you're operating in the B2B space, Latika, that's a good question. If you're operating in the B2B space, you still need to look at who your customer persona is. Let me just look at the Healthify Me example again. We also had a thriving B2B business. A lot of people do not actually know of this. Apart from B2C, we also had a B2B program where we worked with a lot of marquee corporate names, a lot of top corporate names across India. We worked with Microsoft. We worked with a lot of, with McKinsey, with TCS, with Infosys, a lot of top brand names in India where we sold corporate wellness programs. Yeah, and for employee engagement. And our target consumer persona for the corporate wellness program was where directors of HR and above, CHROs, directors of HR and above, who are essentially in charge of employee engagement, or CXOs, even if they were outside of HR, who had the ability to influence these decisions. So if you are operating in the B2B space and your target consumer persona still resides on LinkedIn, then you can make LinkedIn your number one platform. Even if you're not B2B, if you're targeting, say, white collar working professionals, like we used to do at Simplilearn, even then LinkedIn is relevant. I know of a lot of startups which go after schools, for example, which are operating in the B2B edtech space, and they're selling to schools. In that case, LinkedIn will not necessarily work. You don't see a lot of school principals and admin heads, who are there and active on LinkedIn, which is why digital in general could not be the answer for your question. You could look at a combination of both event-led acquisition and engagement, and of course, channel partnerships, where you work with other channel partners who already have their networks and tentacles established.
Where do you find the channel partners, Veda?
You have enough and more channel partners available. For example, there could be chapter associations, for example, for a lot of these schools, for local geographies, whom you could work with. You could work with other B2B SaaS companies which are already selling to schools, and it's fairly easy for you to discover this from the internet, from your connections, network of networks, and you establish partnerships with them, wherein you bundle your offering along with theirs, and then you sell it as a bundled offering. Either white label it, or you could sell it as a separate branded offering. You could do a combination of different places. Plus, of course, the other one is through event-led acquisition. Events are a great way for you to drive acquisitions and, of course, engagement in the B2B space. So it depends. So if your primary influencer decision maker, the primary persona that you're selling to in the B2B space, is fairly active on LinkedIn, LinkedIn can work really well for you. The example that I gave you, right? HR professionals, we were selling to HR heads, and at Healthify Me for our corporate wellness programs, LinkedIn was a big source of acquisition for us from a digital perspective. If you're not so lucky, you need to look at some of these other, non-digital, non-standard place for acquisition and engagement. Hope that helps, Latika.
Yeah, so far so good. Keep going. Thanks.
Sure. Now, what happens if you're niche, just carrying on from where I left off, but you are not that lucky? The nature of your category is such that you're not able to strike a very strong personal connect with your end customer. Then what do you do? Now, let me give you an example. At Razorpay, we have this very similar problem. Razorpay is a B2B company, Latika. We are a B2B payments company, and we sell primarily to the SME and the startup persona. Our target customer is people like yourself, right? Startup CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, business owners, etc. Now, the nature of our category is such, we can't take it personally. The nature of our category is such, an entrepreneur is not going to wake up in the morning and get excited about the fact that they want to use Razorpay's payment gateway offering or a payment page or a payment link. That's just the nature of the category. It's not like health and fitness. It doesn't have the ability to strike a very strong personal connect with your target persona. Then what do we do? Right? So at Razorpay, and we're also niche. So it's like a double whammy. One, my keyword search volumes aren't very great. We're not a B2C, we not operate in the B2C space, right? We're not a peer-to-peer payments company like a Google Pay or a Phone Pay or a Paytm in India. So we operate in the B2B payment space. So we're niche. I don't have a lot of people searching for payment gateway, keywords. Plus, the double whammy is that I can't strike a very strong personal connect. The nature of my category is such with my end customer. What do I do? So in this case, I focus a lot on SEO, and I create content which is not just relevant for the payment gateway space, which is the sandbox that I'm currently operating within, because I obviously do that, but I don't just do that because you don't have a lot of keyword search volumes. I also create keyword search. I also create content which is targeted at keyword pools which are slightly miscellaneous and neighboring to the space that I'm operating in, which doesn't have a direct relevance to my business, but is still extremely relevant to my target persona, which is startup entrepreneurs, founders, business owners. What are these? I create content around how do I use digital marketing for growing my business? How do I read a P&L and balance sheet as a first-time entrepreneur? How do I navigate GST, which is an extremely complicated tax structure here in India? How do I navigate the GST maze as a first-time entrepreneur?
Sorry. So let me repeat what you said, because I think this is very relevant for the founders who've come on board. So if you are a B2B business, what you are suggesting is that to create content with keywords that would be relevant for the target audience, correct?
Correct.
And correct. where would they post this information? Are you talking about LinkedIn, Facebook? So is that what you're recommending? Is to create a lot of content about your product or adjacent in terms of in your vertical, and to put this up?
Correct. So you have a blog of your own in which, and if you want, you can create. So for example, at Razorpay, we've got two separate blog properties. One is the blog itself, which goes after payment lifecycle related keywords, right? Which are relevant to us as a brand, which is relevant to our business, which has a limited keyword volume because we operate in a niche space, but it is still relevant for our business. We also have a separate blog property, which we call as Learn, which is the Razorpay University program, where we create content which is not actually relevant for our business in the immediate term, but is relevant for my target customer, which is relevant to my target consumer, which is around the space of three specific spaces: digital literacy, financial literacy, and compliance. We create content on all of these three particular areas, which have much larger keyword demand patterns and keyword demand volumes than just the payment sandbox. So as a brand, I have the opportunity to gain access to a larger volume of eyeballs than I would have had access to if I had just focused on payments. But I'm not getting irrelevant audiences. I'm still targeting entrepreneurs. Keep in mind, I'm not targeting B2C audiences. I still create content which is relevant for entrepreneurs operating in these three spaces, these three larger sandboxes. So as a brand, I'm gaining access to a larger eyeball universe, gaining a larger traffic pool, which I then engage and nurture over a period of time through my content and eventually convert them into paying customers. Obviously, this funnel would take a longer time to start actually monetizing, but it's a great opportunity for you to get these people in through your funnel. So it doesn't make sense for you to, for example, spend marketing dollars in going after this particular cohort because it's not directly relevant to your business. But what you can very well do, this is more of a long-term play, it's a marathon, is keep creating content, organic content, which goes after all of these keyword pools. Hope that makes sense, Latika.
And when you say your blog, is that blog on your website, or are you talking about other websites?
On your website, yes.
On your own website.
For example, we have razorpay.com/blog, which focuses on all of the payments lifecycle related keywords. We've got a razorpay.com/learn, which focuses on all of the non-payments lifecycle keywords, which is on digital literacy, financial literacy, and compliance.
Okay, so on your own website, so for all you B2B founders out there, on your own website, make sure there's a blog and keep that updated on a regular basis with keywords that are relevant to your business. So anytime there's a search, that kind of ups your chances of being shown in terms of the search.
Yeah, but don't just focus on keywords, which are relevant to your business if you're operating in a niche space, because your keyword volume is going to be fairly low. Also focus on those keyword pools which have much larger search demand patterns, even if they're not directly relevant to your business, but are still relevant for your target persona.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Moving on,
Thanks.
I'm just going to double click a little on some of the things that we did at Healthify Me. From a customer acquisition perspective. We did a lot of mobile marketing, as I said. That was our primary breadwinner. And because we were essentially a freemium app, we were an app-only platform. Facebook, for the reasons that I had mentioned earlier, was the #1 breadwinner for us. And what we also did a lot of was Google UAC campaigns. UAC stands for Universal App Campaigns, and we've done a really good job of this. And where our first experience with UAC campaigns was very underwhelming. Right, and UAC, it was first launched around 4-5 years ago, and Google made it the de facto mechanism through which you could do mobile marketing for your app, for driving app install campaigns via the Google ecosystem. And when it was first launched, a lot of advertisers hated it because you had to give up a lot of your control to Google through these UAC campaigns. And what this also meant was advertisers were used to a lot of control on Google, and they didn't want to give up control. Here, you had to essentially give Google your Play Store, your iTunes listing, your creatives, your copy, etc. And Google would make the decision on whom to target, when, and where. Of course, you could define your sandbox. You could tell Google that, say, I only want to target people in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Singapore, in India, for example. But beyond that, you had limited control. And when we first launched UAC campaigns, the results were pretty poor. The ROI, it was a distant second to Facebook. ROI wasn't great. But what we did was we persisted with Google UAC campaigns. And over 3 successive quarters, we noticed that it had become a very close second to Facebook. That was because we had done a really good job of instrumenting something called as the Google Pixel across various points in the user's lifecycle journey on our app. So the Google Pixel essentially is a piece of JavaScript code which you can embed in your app or your website's code base, which essentially keeps feeding back. It's like a feedback loop, which sends back non-personally identifiable information into the Google ecosystem. Let me try to simplify this with an example. Let's say Latika comes in and installs a Healthify Me app. She registers on the app. She gives us a sense of what her health goals are, if she's suffering from lifestyle conditions, etc. Now, she has just completed what is called as an upstream life cycle event in her life cycle of engagement with the app. Now, this information is sent back to Google, non-personally identifiable, right? So, which essentially gives Google a sense of who Latika is in terms of her digital behavior, right? What are her digital footprints like? Then Latika continues to engage with the app. She continues to consume content on the Healthify Me app. Latika could be a CHRO who's coming from a B2B company, or she could be an individual. Latika essentially signs up for a 7-day free trial, for example. I send this information back. This is again a midstream event as part of her life cycle of engagement with the brand. Now, Latika eventually picks up a 6-month yoga plan. She pays 10,000 Indian rupees for that plan. And this information, which is a downstream event, is again sent back to Google. Now, what I tell Google is this: Google, listen, I love Latika. Go find me 100 more clones of Latika, right, who exhibit similar kind of digital footprint behavior. Now, what Google does, and Google uses, and I know machine learning and artificial intelligence are much abused terms today, but Google really have...
Veda, hold that point, right? So what you're saying is that when you say that you tell Google that you want a similar digital persona like myself, and so how do you do that? Does that happen automatically as a result of embedding Google Pixel? Because you okay, that's what I read. Okay.
Yeah, correct. Where was I? So this information is sent back into the Google ecosystem, and I asked Google to go find me more clones of Latika. Now Google has an artificial intelligence backed machine learning algorithm, which actually looks at all of those people who exhibit similar kind of digital footprints as Latika. Now Google's ability and the algorithm's accuracy in being able to find these clones would be fairly limited to begin with, when it has a limited data set to play with, because it just has information of one Latika. Now, over time, if you continue to persist with the UAC program and you've done a good job of instrumenting this pixel in your code base, you send information back to Google. I'm now over time, if I send information back to Google of 100 Latikas, and I ask Google to go find the next 10,000 of them, right? Google's algorithms ability and its accuracy improves greatly. Now that is something that we did, and over 3 successive quarters with improving scale and persistence, we noticed that the UAC campaigns became a very close second to Facebook. This is what I really love to refer to as inside out targeting. The traditional form of customer targeting is outside in, wherein you as a digital marketer, as an entrepreneur, decide who your ideal customer persona is through research, and then you try to go after that customer segment. In this form of new age digital form of customer targeting, you're letting programmatic platforms like Facebook and Google either validate or challenge your original hypothesis on who your ideal customer persona is using data and using customer behavior patterns on your website or your application. For example, at Healthy Family, when we first started off, we thought the millennial was our ideal customer persona. Turns out it wasn't. It was people who are beyond the millennial bracket, who had the greater ability to pay, who are less healthy, and who are more concerned about their health, who are the ideal consumer persona. App Store optimization, again, something that's very important. You can think of App Store optimization is popularly referred to as ASO. You can think of it as SEO, search engine optimization's cousin, close cousin, but relevant for the app ecosystem. So if you want to make sure that your app's listing on the Play Store, on the iTunes Store, bubbles up higher and higher for relevant keyword search queries, you need to do a really good job of App Store optimization. And we have done a really good job of this. So even during quarters when marketing dollars were hard to come by, our scale never dropped because we've done a fantastic job of App Store optimization. In-app marketing, we did a lot of that, and we used a lead scoring algorithm to actually determine which specific high probability of conversion cohorts we could actually target through our intervention. So we had various kinds of interventions, like say a 7-day free trial or a free diet, no strings attached diet consultation with one of my top nutritionists. We had these kinds of in-app marketing hooks, and we used these really well for targeting specific cohorts. We knew using data that people from a metro city, they would convert better than somebody from a tier 2 town. We knew from data that somebody who's using an iPhone has a greater probability of conversion than somebody using an Android phone. We knew from data that somebody who has some kind of a lifestyle condition, like say a hypertension or a diabetes, have a higher probability of conversion than somebody who does not. So we used combination of both demographic, geographic, and behavioral data points, user behavioral data points, to construct a blended lead score on the basis of which we targeted the top lead cohorts with these kinds of specific marketing interventions.
Again, for startups or in their early phase, when all of this data is available through Google Analytics, right? Is that what you did, or are you all removing the data of your database separately and putting business intelligence there?
So all of this is available through not necessarily Google. Google Analytics has a reasonable, user behavior analytics platform when it comes to the mobile app. If you're running a website, GA is great. But if you're using a mobile app, I would recommend some other tool like a CleverTap or a MoEngage for you to be able to capture these data points.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on, we also had done a really good job of email marketing, but I'll get into email marketing when I get into the case study on Simply Learn. And we had also done a fantastic job of something called as AMP, Accelerated Mobile Pages, which is essentially a simple infrastructural tweak you need to make to your mobile website's front-end code to make sure that your mobile website ranks really high when it comes to mobile SEO. This is something which is extremely important if you want to improve your chances of ranking high on mobile searches, mobile search queries. Shifting tracks, we've been looking at customer acquisition so far. Now let's shift our focus and look at lead engagement and nurturing. What are some of the best practices for you to look at when it comes to engagement and nurturing? Engagement nurturing essentially is about working with people who have already entered your funnel, who already have an affinity and an awareness around your brand, and how do you extract juice out of them? How do you monetize those cohorts of leads? And how do you communicate in an automated fashion across all of these prospects, across touch points? It could be email, it could be WhatsApp, it could be SMS, it could be browser notifications. How do you engage and nurture these audiences so that you can convert them into paying customers? In some cases, it could also be your existing customers. It could be anything. Now we're going to look at a small caselet from my experiences at Simplilearn, which is one of the world's largest edtech companies. And Simplilearn again has both a B2C and a B2B component. The B2C component involves providing courses in say digital marketing, in say data science, in iOS, Android programming, project management to working professionals to help them get ahead in their career. The B2B offering involves corporate learning solutions for large corporates. Here again, we used to work with chief learning officers, HR heads, etc., who was the primary persona, the decision maker, in the decision of a purchase of a corporate learning solution. So let's say that Latika is interested in, say, learning digital marketing. She comes and signs up on the Simplilearn platform. I'm just going to, explain some of the things that we did in Simplilearn by using a simplified example. And I'm going to, if Latika, if you don't mind, I'm going to take your example again. Latika comes in and signs up for the digital marketing course at Simplilearn. On day 0, she gets a communication across email, WhatsApp, SMS, etc., which says, "Welcome to the digital marketing program. Latika, congratulations, you've taken the first step in building your career in digital marketing." A few days after that, she would get communication that gives her a sense of the latest and greatest blogs on digital marketing, which are curated from the Simplilearn blog specifically for her and personalized. A few days after that, she gets testimonials of people just like herself who have advanced in their careers after having taken this program. A few days after that, she gets a webinar invitation, which is being conducted by an industry leader like this one, which essentially helps her build greater trust and affinity towards the brand. A few days after that, if you notice, none of the earlier communications had anything salesy. There was no information of the brand trying to peddle its products to the prospect. Finally, on day 18, she gets a communication which gives her a 20% discount code, which expires in 48 hours, just to build a sense of FOMO, which is the slam dunk, right? The brand is doing, trying to close that sale. So what they have done over the first 18 days is they've tried to warm up and engage the prospect, and then they're eventually going in for the kill, so to speak, wherein they're coming in with the sales pitch. What you see here is a classic, and this is used by both B2C and B2B companies, especially more relevant for B2B. And I'll tell you why in just a minute. What you see here is a classic.
Important question here. When you say, what is the mode of delivery that you recommend for this information, right? Because is it email? Because if it is B2B, email may make sense in terms of doing this 18-day slowly build up about the brand. But B2C, so what are the means of connecting with this potential customer?
So you've got multiple, there's email, you've got WhatsApp, you've got text messaging, you've got browser notifications, and recently a lot of these, and I'll just get to that in a minute, marketing automation platforms, which essentially help you automate a lot of these communications to your prospects at various points in the life cycle. They also have an IVR feature where you can have automated bot-based calling. You don't need to have a human being who's actually doing the calling at these specific time intervals. You can have IVR, which is also automated. So all of these are possible through marketing automation platforms across all of these different channels. Yeah. So, yeah. And what you see here is a classic marketing drip communication. And it's called a drip because it is very similar to water dripping off a tap, one after another, after another. All of these communications also go out one after another, after another. That's why it's called a marketing drip. And all of your efforts to automate, to Latika's point, automate all of these communication templates based on the consumer persona at specific intervals of time can be orchestrated in the backend through something called as a marketing automation platform. I've given here some very popular names of the world's top marketing automation platforms. HubSpot is the world's leader. Acton, Marketo, the very popular. Salesforce, world's leading CRM, also has a marketing automation module. But most of these are pretty much unaffordable and extremely expensive for early stage and bootstrap companies. I'm giving you here a bunch of different marketing automation platforms, which are more value for money and affordable if you're an early stage bootstrap company. And if you're not having the kind of scale that a large enterprise has, a lot of these platforms will necessarily do the job that is needed. You've got Active Campaigns, which is a really good one. You've got Freshworks has a product called Fresh Marketer. You've got Zoho, and of course WebEngage. These would be my recommendations, especially if you are an early stage startup or an SME. Moving on, there are a couple of different ways in which engagement and nurturing can help you. One is as part of the transaction lifecycle itself for driving conversions, like we just saw in Latika's case, right? When she was trying to sign up at Simplilearn, Simplilearn was using and leveraging engagement and nurturing to convert Latika into a paying customer as part of the transaction lifecycle. Now, this works really well when your sales lifecycle or your transaction lifecycle is very large. For example, in Simply Learn's case, we knew that prospects would take at least a month to become a paying customer. Or if you're a B2B company, let's say you're Infosys, which is looking to sell to large enterprises, you know that your sales life cycles are upwards of 12 months, right? It takes 12, a B2B deal takes 12, 18, 24 months to close. So in cases, or if you're operating in a category, or you're working for a brand, or you're running a company which is having a large sales life cycle, which is the average time it takes for a prospect to become a paying customer, in that case, you've got the luxury of time available at your disposal. Right? For those of you who are cricket fans here and are able to relate with this, it's like a test match. You've got the luxury of time. You can build an innings. You can engage and nurture Latika, because I know she's not going to run away anywhere. I know that it takes her on an average a month to become a paying customer. So I can use engagement and nurturing primarily for driving conversions as part of the transaction lifecycle. Now, what happens if I'm not that lucky? What happens if I'm, say, in online pizza delivery, or if I'm selling flights online, where the average sales life cycles are fairly small? If I'm, say, a Domino's Pizza operating in India, my average sales life cycle is 5 minutes. I don't have the luxury of time to engage and nurture my prospect over a period of time. Before the prospect has even seen that email, they would have converted. They would have made that decision to pay with either myself or with a competitor. So in this case, I know that Latika loves pizza. I can't really influence Latika's decision to choose or not choose Domino's as part of that transaction. It's too late. But what I can do is, I know that Latika loves pizza toppings. She loves cheese pizza and she loves vegetarian pizza. So I keep sending her information on what are some of the latest and greatest new innovations that I have. What are the most exotic toppings that I have in my pizza base over a period of time. So the next time Latika is looking to make a pizza delivery online, she remembers Domino's Pizza, right? So I can use engagement and nurturing for driving brand loyalty, customer stickiness, and repeat behavior. In cases where my sales life cycle is extremely small, and by extremely small, I mean less than 2 days. So in cases where it is larger than that, you can use it primarily for driving conversions because you've got the luxury of time. In cases where you've got a very limited time window to play with, you use it primarily for driving repeats and customer stickiness. Moving on, the other use case for which you can use engagement and nurturing is on refunneling users. For example, at Simply Learn, we had this entire concept of dead leads, right? These were people whom the sales team had tried their best and given up on. They couldn't convert. Not because the targeting was wrong or the audience was irrelevant. It's just because they didn't have the ability to pay right then and there. So what we used to do was we used to refunnel them back. So what is your classic marketing funnel? You've got traffic on top, you've got leads in the middle, and you've got paying customers at the bottom. And it's called a funnel because you have people dropping off at various points in the funnel. Now, we used to also refunnel users, people who had dropped off the funnel, who had kind of dropped past the radar. We used to refunnel them back by using some kind of a revival drip campaign, and we used to put them back into the funnel 3 months after the sales team had given up to try and monetize them, just to say that it's been a while since we connected, we have improved as a brand, can we talk again, right? And here is some information, etc., on some of the latest digital marketing blogs. Do you want to pick up the threads from where we left off last time? Something like this. So which was a great way for us to refunnel users and improve marketing ROI. At Healthify Me, we had this huge cohort of hibernating users, which were users who had the app on their phones but had forgotten about it. They've not launched it in the last month. So we used to use a lot of live content to actually revive them. So for example, we used to have a lot of Instagram lives, which used to be streamed live on the app, and which talks about, say, dangers of crash dieting, advantages of a vegan diet, advantages of a keto diet, etc., which were being conducted by a top nutritionist and or maybe a third-party expert. And this was a great way for me to drive engagement even with the hibernating cohort because it is live content. And that was something that we focused on both at Simply Learn and at Healthify Me. Now, I understand that most of you here are business owners, CEOs, and you relate better with business jargon than you do with marketing jargon. I know that there is a lot of marketing jargon that we've spoken about so far. In very simple terms, if you were to try and understand in business language why you need engagement and nurturing, there are two strong answers for it, two strong reasons. One is your sales team is going to be a lot more happy. I don't know about you guys, but in any, all of the opportunities that I've had to interact and work closely with CEOs, their most favorite team is the sales team because they see the sales team as the people who bring in the money and the marketers, unfortunately enough, as the guys who end up spending their money. And if you're giving the CEO an opportunity to make their sales team more productive, that's something the CEO is going to love. Now, let's say Latika runs a company which has an inside sales team, which is say a 5-member inside sales team, which can make 20 calls a day. They work for 20 days a month, which means they can get in touch with around 2,000. They can make 2,000 calls a month if my math is right. Let's assume, for simplicity's sake, for this example, that each of these calls equals a unique prospect that the team is trying to get in touch with. So they can get in touch with 2,000 prospects in a given month. But what happens if Latika's pipeline is 10,000 strong? How does Latika's team determine which are the most relevant top 2,000 to get in touch with out of this 10,000? They could be using some kind of an unscientific method, right? Which could be first in, first out, last in, first out, etc. But is there a better way? That's where the power of technology, the power of marketing automation, engagement and nurturing comes in. Wherein using marketing automation platforms, using the power of technology, you can send communication across channels, email, text messaging, WhatsApp, browser notifications, IVR to all of these 10,000 people. And you can see the kind of engagement that they exhibit, the kind of behavior that they exhibit. How many of them are opening your emails? How many of them are clicking on your emails? How many of them are accepting your invitation for a webinar? How many of them are actually attending? How many of them are visiting your pricing page where you've listed the prices of various products? Using a lot of these different signals, you can construct a blended holistic lead score for a lot of these 10,000 prospects. The higher the lead score, the greater is their ability to convert, the probability of conversion. Now, all Latika sales team now needs to do is to sort the 10,000 prospects in descending order of lead score and call the top 2,000. That's it. So there are two benefits here. One is the sales team is spending their time more productively with prospects who have been engaged and nurtured and have a higher probability of conversion, which means increased top line. There is an opportunity for Latika's company to make more money. Plus, the other incidental byproduct, good byproduct from all of this is that her sales team is not getting in touch with the remaining 8,000 folks who are not quite ready to make a purchase decision. So her brand equity is also not being eroded. She's not spam calling the remaining 8,000. So for both angles, it works really well. Increased top line, that's one primary reason. The second reason why you should consider engagement and nurturing, and I cannot stress this enough, is that a lot of these marketing automation platforms, the pricing for a lot of these marketing automation platforms is by a factor of 10,000 more efficient and more cost effective than cost per click CPC or cost per 1,000 impressions, CPM based platforms like a Facebook or a Google or any other digital platform for engagement and nurturing, which means that your holy grail marketing KPI, which is cost of customer acquisition, that goes down. So for the same marketing spend or lesser, you get to acquire higher number of customers. So which means that your bottom line improves. So for two strong reasons, need to consider engagement and nurturing. One is increased top line and increased bottom line. A quick question, a question that I'm often asked is how long should I consider and keep doing my engagement and nurture efforts? What happens if I'm B2C? What do I do if I'm B2B, etc.? So the example that I gave you in the Simplilearn case was for a case where the sales life cycle was approximately 30 days, a month. So a rule of thumb for you to consider is you send your engagement and nurture communication for approximately 3/4 of your sales life cycle. It's like a relay race, with the first 3/4 of the race being run by the marketer who sends the engagement and nurture communication. Then he or she hands over the baton to the sales guy to come in and close a sale in the home stretch, the last lap, which is the last 25% of the relay race. So if you were, say, a B2B company, Infosys, which takes, say, 12 months plus, sales life cycles are 12 months, it would have been crazy if I had sent 5 emails to the prospect in a month. The prospect would have marked me as spam. I would have been better off by sending monthly newsletters if I were operating in the B2B space. Or if I were Simplilearn and I was sending Latika 5 emails in 2 days, she would have marked me as spam. Or if I had used the B2B example in Simplilearn case, sent 1 email every month in the Simplilearn case, that would have been crazy as well because the prospect would have run away to a competitor, right? So you've got to space it out and make sure that you have approximately 3 to 5 touch points, right? That's a good frequency to benchmark against. Approximately 3 to 5 touch points, 3 to 5 hits with your customer over 3/4 of your sales life cycle. I hope that helps. We're almost down to the end of the presentation where we're going to look at a couple of different bonus features. One is on the need for driving repeat business, why it's so important for any brand, for any business. I'm going to talk to you about a couple of different examples here. The first is about what was back then one of India's top online ethnic wear fashion players. Before the biggies, Flipkart and Amazon started their Indian ethnic wear focus, this was back then India's top online ethnic wear marketplace. And by Indian ethnic wear, I mean Indian ethnic clothing, like say saris, salwar kameez, kurtis, kurtas, sherwanis for men, and so on. And this was a company back then, and it still is today, a company which was very healthy, right? Strong EBITDA, strong gross margins, unlike a lot of e-com unicorns across the world. This was a company that made real money, positive cash flows. But the problem with the company was it had very low repeats, because customers would come in, would buy, and the average selling prices, the ASPs were fairly high, right? So they would buy maybe a $600, $700 lehenga or a sari or a sherwani, and they would disappear for 2-3 years. They would buy it for a wedding or for a festival like a Diwali, a New Year, an Eid, etc., and then they would disappear for 3 years, never to come back, which was a big problem. So when we were looking to raise funds from a lot of venture capitalists, they found the business to be inherently risky, because they felt as a brand, the business was only dependent on new customers, new customer acquisition, but there was no stickiness built in. People were just not repeat transacting. It was like customers were coming in through one door and leaving through the other, never to come back, which was a big problem. And while the company still continues to exist, it still continues to do well, it has never been able to achieve the kind of hockey stick growth that a lot of brands aspire towards, which was a big problem. So fast forward several years, at Simplilearn, we were faced with a very similar problem. Again, in the Indian context, Simplilearn, again, the ASPs are fairly high, average selling prices. It's around 15,000-20,000 rupees, Indian rupees, which is fairly high. And good EBITDAs, good gross margins, etc. But the problem statement was very similar and very familiar. It was low customer repeats. So if I've just convinced Latika to spend 20,000 bucks of her hard-earned money in a digital marketing program, it's going to be a pretty difficult conversation for me to convince her to spend another 20,000 bucks in another course, right? So the solution that we came up with, we managed to turn this around, was we decided that we pivoted the brand to focus on the fact that we're not just a training provider. My relationship with Ratika is not just a transactional one, but I am her career planner. I am her learning partner, and I'm selling her the concept of a learning path. I'm not just a training provider for Latika. I'm selling her a concept of a learning path. Now, Latika is here at the base of this mountain. She's just completed one course. She wants to get to this peak, which could be, if she's on the marketing track, the CMO role, Chief Marketing Officer role, or if she's in the data science track, the Chief Data Scientist role. And I'm telling Latika that, Latika, this is your learning path that I have crafted for you, specifically for you. You need to take not just this one course, but these 3-4 courses. And at the peak, you've got the master's program, which was sold at 3x of the ASP. It was sold at 50,000 Indian rupees. And you've got to take all of this, and that will complete your learning path. Essentially, it was a bundled offering that we were selling, but we packaged it as a learning path. And the brand was essentially taking a higher moral ground. And that was something that we specifically did, where we targeted specific existing customers of Simplilearn. And we had a lot of these repeat drip emailers. So we used drips not for our prospects, but for our existing customers to drive repeat business and repeat revenue. And over 3 successive quarters, repeat revenue, which was virtually non-existent, grew to almost 15% of our month-on-month revenue contributions, which was a great growth for us. And this was completely incremental ground-up revenue, not coming from new customers, but from existing customers. And that's how we turned it around at Simplilearn. We're almost down to the end of the presentation. Now, we're going to look at what are the various ways and means by which you can, as a marketer, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, drive exposure for your brand. Let's try and understand this with a simple example again. Let's say Latika runs a company which has a Facebook page, which has 100 followers. She makes a simple post. Her team makes a simple post, and she doesn't spend any money in promoting it. So all her followers end up seeing it, right? And we know that I've just simplified this for the purpose of this example. We know that organic reach is not 100%. Mark Zuckerberg has gone on record saying that your organic reach will start tending to zero and will start going down as your follower base grows, which means that when you've got 1,000 followers, you make a post, 700 of them might end up seeing it. When you've got 10,000 followers, you make a post, 4,000 of them might end up seeing it. When you've got 100,000 followers, you make a post, 20,000 of them might end up seeing it. You can understand where I'm going with this, which is Facebook's own way of nudging you to start spending money on the platform as you grow, because they know that you've got more money to spend because your follower base is growing, right? So, but for this example, let's assume that all 100 of them end up seeing it. So the exposure that Latika's brand has got to all of these 100 eyeballs is called owned media, because this is her own band of loyal followers, right? So this is called owned media. Let's say that Latika is in a hurry to drive growth. She spends 10,000 Indian rupees and she sponsors and she bumps up, she boosts that particular post, and she gets exposure to an additional, there is no one-on-one correlation. This is again simplified for the purpose of this example. She gets exposure to an additional 10,000 people. Now, this is exposure that Latika has got because she has paid for it. This is called paid media. Now, there is a third form of exposure creation which a lot of brands do not focus enough on, which is even more powerful and has the ability to create that holy grail, which is every marketer's dream of virality, which is earned media. Now, let's say the content, the post that Latika's social media team posted was so awesome, it was so great, she's not spent any money in promoting it, that out of her 100 followers, 50 of them ended up resharing it on their own timelines, and each of them had 100 followers each. So Latika's brand has now got exposure to 50 multiplied by 100, 5,000 incremental people who are not her own. So it's not own media, she's not paid for it, it's not paid media, but it is something that Latika's brand has earned through the strength of her content. Now, social media shares are a great way for you to drive earned media for your brand, and it drives a lot more trust and credibility for your brand than any other forms of media exposure, brand creation. There are other ways to drive earned media as well. PR, organic editorial PR is a great way. Let's say Latika gets covered in an interview in the New York Times, right? This is not, New York Times readership is not her own, so it's not own media. Latika is not paid for this. It's not an advertisement or an editorial. It's pure editorial organic coverage. So it's not paid media, but it is something that Latika's brand has earned through the strength of her work, through the strength of her brand. Another great way for you to create earned media as a brand, this is again underutilized, is through third-party discussion forums. A lot of Silicon Valley brands do a really good job of this. A lot of Asian startups do not focus enough on this particular space. And I would urge you to focus a lot more on earned media, and especially on third-party discussion forums, like say Quora, for example. Let's say there is a discussion in Quora on, as an entrepreneur, right? How do I choose the right payment gateway for my website, which has say 10,000 views. Now, as Razorpay, I have an opportunity to inject my brand into that conversation in a non-salesy fashion by adding value, right? That gives me exposure, right? It's not that the views on that particular Quora thread are not my own. It's not owned. I'm not paid for it. I'm not running ads on Quora, but it is something that I have earned as a brand. I've got exposure to incremental eyeballs, which are not my own, without spending money. Great way for you to create earned media. And of course, there are other ways as well. For example, on social media, at Razorpay, we've done a lot of campaigns around the hashtag unlock growth, where we've asked entrepreneurs where we try to crowdsource information on what are their mantras for actually unlocking growth in the post-pandemic new world order. At Healthify Me, we've run a lot of campaigns around hashtag New Year resolution at the start of the new year, just to crowdsource information on what are people's New Year resolutions, health and fitness resolutions. At Simply Learn, we've had hashtag 2016 Career Wish, or Career Wish at the start of every year, just to ask people what are their career aspirations for the upcoming new year. And social media shares are a great way, as I said, for you to drive virality. And if you're talking about virality, there are two very strong examples of virality. There is Gangnam Style, which was probably one of the earliest examples of a global viral phenomenon, which I'm sure a lot of people, a lot of the audience from Southeast Asia and from the Asia Pacific region would relate with. Plus, of course, in the Indian context, there was this, what was quite easily, this was way back in 2012, when social media was really booming in India, when a song called Kolaveri D and the making of that song, that video became a huge viral hit in the country. It captured the imagination of the entire country. While a lot of people would be aware of Kolaveri D, not a lot of people are aware of some of the backroom workings that went into making Kolaveri D the viral phenomenon it actually became. Let's take a look at this video, which gives you a sense of that.
How much money do you think is required to make a song world super hit? 10 million? 20 million? We spent zero. Close the mouth. I'll tell you how. First, we shot the making of the song and then added subtitles for all the non-Tamilians. Then the most important, we added the collar ringback tone code for making some pocket money. We then put up the video on our YouTube channel and then seeded it on social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter. To get the audience watching and talking about our song, we created a hook, hashtag why this Kolaveri D, which is a commonly used phrase in my state, Tamil Nadu, when somebody irritates you. Next 3 days, full tweeting different irritating situations with the hashtag why this color very deep, but we also added the link to our song with it. So people who could relate to that irritating situation clicked on the link, watched the song and forgot their irritation. They also understood the usage of the question, why this color very deep? And then they started tweeting about things which frustrated them with the hashtag and also added the link to our song. Basically, people love venting their frustration on social media, and we use this insight to get hashtag Kolaveri trending on Twitter over 3 full days. Even people like Amitabh Bachchan ji and Anand Mahindra ji tweeted. The YouTube views kept on increasing. People were viewing, sharing. More than 41 million views across 220 countries. People love to ape a trend. So we put up a candid video of our own people singing the song in chorus, following which hundreds of people put in their own versions. Some even organized flash mobs, not just in India, even Netherlands and New Zealand. Oh, and by the way, the total caller ringback tones downloaded was 2 million and still counting. This brought us so much revenue that we are still counting actually. Okay, the enormous online buzz pushed even TV and print media to talk about the song. Articles were written on blogs, tabloids, and even newspapers. It was featured in news channels and music channels. Every radio station in the country played Kolaveri. In simple words, earned media is estimated to be more than 67 million rupees only. Money spent, zero. Mission accomplished.
That was very interesting, but let's play a quick game of truth or dare, Latika. There's actually one thing this person has said, which is actually the truth. And one thing that this person has said, which is actually not quite true. Any guesses on what they might be? From you or from the audience?
Let me check what the audience has to say.
The fact that they actually spent zero in promoting that song is actually not true. And I know this for a fact. And they actually spent some money upfront during the initial days to give the song a critical mass of audience awareness. They didn't spend it in overt advertising, but they spend it in very intelligent seeding of content in communities, in intelligent, covert, subtle forms of influencer marketing. And that is true for almost anything that goes viral, wherein you need to spend an initial amount of money in getting paid media exposure. And of course, assuming that your content is inherently viral, you can shut off the paid media injection. You can shut off your, you can stop clenching your marketing muscles and you can let earned media take over through social media shares after a point, right? But it needs to reach that critical mass of audience awareness. It's very
what is critical mass for B2B versus a B2C, right? There's a very, very different again, the numbers.
Yeah. So just for B2B, right? So for example, at Razorpay, we sell to both SMEs, which has a target market size in the Indian context of around 2 million. In the B2B space, the list of named companies that we go after is around 5,000. So one small rule of thumb that I often recommend is if you're able to reach around 5% of your TAM through paid marketing, that you can consider to be a critical mass which you have potentially reached. It's almost like a rocket looking to escape from Earth's gravitational pull. You need to reach that minimum escape velocity, after which you can essentially fly free. So if you've got a piece of content which you're very confident of, which you believe can go viral, regardless of whether you're a B2B or a B2C company, 5%, 2 to 5% is a holy grail number for you to look at. After which your content has to be inherently viral for people to keep sharing and resharing. So that's a good rule of thumb for you to keep in mind.
Okay, great. So I think we've got about 15 minutes. Sorry.
Yeah. So that's all I had for you today. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Would love to take any questions that the audience has.
Yeah, sure. Great session, Veda. I think we should have done this in 2 parts because there's so much of content that you've cleared. We may have to bring you on board again, but let's go to the questions. So a question from Binny says, if I'm targeting farmers, do you say YouTube or Facebook?
That's an interesting one. Farmers, again, digital cannot be the answer every single time. And if you're targeting farmers, and I don't know the nature of the business that you're operating in, and Google search-led acquisition isn't very natural. Let's say you're setting up a marketplace, for example, Binny. I don't know what you're looking to do, but let's say you're setting up a marketplace for selling, say, tractors and other rural equipment to farmers. So in which case, let's say you've already got a supplier base set up for your marketplace and you're now looking to build on demand. I don't think Google search will work as much for you because search behavior isn't very natural for farmers. And you could of course try Facebook and YouTube because you do have a lot of farmers who are, who are fairly there, who are fairly active, spend a lot of time consuming content on Facebook and YouTube, but your pilferage is going to be a lot. Your signal to noise ratio is going to be fairly poor. So which is why I wouldn't recommend Facebook or YouTube. LinkedIn, of course, is irrelevant. So which is why I would make the same recommendation that I made earlier, when it comes to the kind of playbooks you should adopt if you were going after, say, an audience which doesn't have a very strong digital affinity, and it is difficult for you to target them using massive platforms like Facebook and Google without a lot of wastage. Which is why I would recommend a combination of both event-led acquisition and channel partner-led acquisition, wherein you work with other companies which already sell products and services to farmers. You work with local farmer associations, chapters, build channel partnerships, either white label it or offer it as a separate branded service in conjunction with the other brand. That is one. Plus, of course, event-led acquisition. These should be my recommendations for you, Binny. I hope that helps. Wish you all the best.
Great. His question is, what would be the best for reaching out to SMEs and SMBs, as marketing to these segments is quite different from the normal B2B like a big corporate. LinkedIn would mostly have executives, but would not really work that well for small business.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm glad you asked that question. SMEs and startups, if you're a company which is targeting SMEs and startups, it's a fairly interesting space to be in. Like, for example, at Razorpay, a lot of our marketing is focused on SMEs and startups. And SMEs and startups are a little bit of a strange animal. It's fairly misunderstood. It's not quite high-end, straight-jacketed B2B, nor is it completely B2C. But the marketing and the growth playbooks you need for being successful in this space are very close to the B2C end of the spectrum than it is to the B2B end of the spectrum. So for example, at Razorpay, we target e-commerce business owners, edtech startup owners, health tech startup owners, freelancers, micro entrepreneurs. Most of these entrepreneurs and companies have less than 3 employees, or they are one-man armies. They're one-man shows. It's a sole proprietorship, right? And mompreneurs, social media entrepreneurs, freelance digital marketers. A lot of these essentially are B2C. While they are B2B strictly by definition, they operate essentially like B2C. So you need to use the same kind of frameworks for acquisition, as you would if you are operating the B2C space. Use the same framework that I gave at the beginning of the conversation. Are you selling a product or service which is massy, in which case you make Google your number one priority? If your niche have a ability to strike a very strong personal connect, Facebook, LinkedIn, not so much for SMEs. I don't think it'll be able to drive scale. You are right when you said that. It might drive scale with the slightly more technology savvy VC funded startups, but you won't be able to go after the micro long tail and the bottom of the pyramid SMEs who don't have a very strong technology affinity, but still have a relevance for your product or service. And of course, if you have the ability to strike a very strong personal connect, of course, Facebook would work really well. At Razorpay, if you look at some of the key playbooks that work well for us, we go after this exact same customer persona, which is the SMEs and startup segment. We do a really good job of SEO. We focus a lot on SEO, not just, if you remember my point that I had made earlier, not just on keyword pools which are relevant for our business, but also on keyword pools which are slightly ancillary, neighboring to our business, not immediately relevant, but relevant for our target customer. So for example, how do you use digital marketing for growth? How do you use growth hacking if you are a first-time digital entrepreneur? How do you read a PLN and balance sheet? Understanding how to read a PNL and balance sheet as a first-time entrepreneur. Navigating, say, GST and compliance, if you're a first-time entrepreneur, etc. Things like these, which have much higher keyword demand patterns, followed by, given the fact that we have the ability, they are a very well-funded company, have a large team, we have the ability to also focus on other channels like Facebook and Google. But my number one priority is SEO. From a marketing perspective, not just on keyword pools related to my business, but also neighboring keyword pools. Hope that helps you.
Thanks, Vida. So David Thompson from New Zealand, his question is, I could be wrong, but isn't Google retiring from the Google sandpit Google regarding advertising cookie function in 2022, which will have massive effect on what you're saving because of the new global privacy?
Yeah, that's a good question, David. And there has been a lot of talk of scaling back the kind of information that Google and Facebook employ, kind of end customer information that Google and Facebook employ in order to enable advertisers to better target their end customers. There's been a lot of talk on this. While there might be incremental changes, I don't see this being completely done away with. I think this will still continue in some shape or form because this essentially drives 99% of Google's revenues. And I don't think they're going to, and they will do all they can to make sure that even if the privacy laws are made a lot tighter, this still exists in some shape or form beyond 2022 as well. So that's my answer to that. I don't see this. So you're right. There are some developments happening in this space, which will probably make the privacy laws a lot tighter, make advertising not as accurate for advertisers, like it is today. So the ROI might go down for advertisers, but it will stay in some shape or form.
Thank you. Ashika Chetiappa, so how do you expect these ideas, insights regarding digital marketing to change the post-pandemic, in the post-pandemic time, given all the lifestyle change? This is regarding B2C.
So in B2C, I just see digital becoming ever more so relevant. If anything, a lot of these best practices become even more relevant in the post-pandemic new world order because digital essentially has become a way of life now. Everybody's on digital. People are stuck at home. I explained the growth of edtech and health tech. We've seen a huge boom of both of these startups. We're seeing a huge gravitation of users to both health tech, edtech, and health tech. We're seeing digital and online shopping become essentially the norm. And I think this will essentially power growth for not just the digital ecosystem, specific categories within the startup ecosystem like edtech, health tech, IT SaaS companies. Gaming has seen a huge boom in India, and I'm sure it must be similar in a lot of developing markets in the last year or so. And I think it will drive and spawn growth for a lot of these sunrise ecosystems. Hope that helps.
Great. I think those were all the questions that we had. Hi, Veda. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Latika. Please carry
great.
on.
Great. I think we're at the end of our questions. It's been a great session. Like I mentioned earlier, there's so much ground you've covered in 60 minutes, right? I think it's going to give many food for thought. The deck that you have given us, would you be able to share it with us if possible?
Of course, I'll do that.
Please, because what we do is we record this and then we post it on YouTube in our webinar series. So if people want to go back and hear, and what you've said, I think that'll be extremely useful. So thank you so much again. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to working, with you on the next series of webinars that we have. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. And thanks for the opportunity. Really enjoyed myself, and a big thank you to the audience for having spent an hour and a half of their lives in this conversation. I hope this was value additive and this was a productive use of your time. Take care, stay safe, and wish everybody good health. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye. Vidal Koli.
Sure.